Hey everyone, welcome back to CryptoCache. Thank you so much for joining me here. I hope you're having a phenomenal day. We're obviously going to take a look at some crypto market overviews, but I think it's important for us to talk a little bit about the backend data here, specifically trends that we've seen with Bitcoin in the past, historical values kind of letting us know where we might go next, but also not to be ridiculously optimistic in this situation because we have broken some macro trend lines and it's important to recognize where we're at now. We're also going to look at some comparative analysis between altcoins and, as per usual, liquidation data here, more local and macro, just kind of understanding roughly what we're looking at here. So it's an important one here today. Be sure to stick around. We got a good one. Let's take a look. All right, folks, before we jump into the backend data here and kind of look at some year over year or month over month, we want to double check important things here really quick with liquidation. So let's just touch on that very fast and just kind of understand that 104,000 is that heavily guarded area here. We got a pretty significant order block. That doesn't mean specifically that we're just going to turn right around at that level, but it does tell us that we're going to see some slowing pressure if we do hit 104K. So we'll talk about that. Before we do go much further, I want to ask you, hit the like button, comment below. Some might say smash the like button. I don't know, you can do whatever you want with it, but I really appreciate you nonetheless doing that every single time you watch my videos. Thank you again so much for just being an amazing part of my life. I've got so many people that have been following me for quite a few years, some over 4.5 years now, and it's pretty awesome, really good experience. Really appreciate you. Thanks again so much for that. And welcome aboard if you're new to the channel. So looking at liquidation here, last 24 hours was a mess, as you probably already saw. I think I analyzed the charts yesterday when we were in the 105 to 106K range, expecting the price to pull back a little bit. It pulled back a lot, hit that 99K range, and swept pretty much all the local liquidation. So this is the last 24 hours here. We can see that there are some longs, of course, in the 100 to 95K range. In other words, these aren't longs that were taken at that level. These are longs with liquidation events in that range. So at this point, with us kind of being in this position right now, we can expect 103.6 to 104K probably as the next likely target, right? Even though there's sell orders right there, we can see there's a lot of liquidation, some shorts that are still really stingy right now, trying to hold their position open without securing profits. Try not to be that person, folks. It's just not a good place to be. Either way, last 7 days, we can see a little more of a macro perspective. Last 7 days, majority of all local liquidation has been swept. They're underneath the price. And the same thing here with the 30-day too. If you saw this for the last couple of days that I've analyzed the charts with you, you can see that pretty much all the liquidation to the downside has been fully swept. We had a really big chunk between 105 and 104K, and then also respectively in that 95 to 100K range. Majority of that is all gone now. Whether or not they close their positions at a loss or they got liquidated, one way or the other, there's just tons of liquidation there that is no longer present, which tells us that the bottom is tentatively in. I want to emphasize that though, because we're not in a position where we're just going to be shooting straight up here. We're in a position where we got to be respectful of the fact that we're probably going to pivot and bounce, which we have so far, but it's very tentative until we break our descending trend line and also get above some key level resistances. And we're going to touch on that too, because there's some specific areas here you need to know on the charts that are super relevant. Before we do, let's go ahead and get a little refresh here and see. For altcoin season index, they were at a 24. We're creeping back up to that $1.5 trillion mark, but we're still not there yet. So we're still in pretty much a bearish type of scenario here where altcoins are just hemorrhaging. Now, a lot of altcoins have responded well to this pullback. In fact, we secured profits on, our SUI long position here, a super risky one. Honestly, this wasn't a phenomenal situation. It was kind of an unfortunate one where we actually got filled on this position here on just the one exchange. The other exchanges hit their stop loss. So it was just kind of a mess, honestly. So nothing to talk about or brag about, but the whole concept is that we saw the price action recover quite quickly here this morning, and altcoins are doing much better than expected in the short-term time frame. Now, does that mean you're just going to take a bunch of longs today with altcoins? Maybe, maybe not. We're going to try to identify that. But the important thing is to recognize that we're not in great shape here, and we got to respect this descending trend until we break above, I would say, that 105 to 107K local resistance range for Bitcoin. We want to be kind of apprehensive in taking longs with altcoins. They still knee-jerk reactions to the downside here. So if we can find some outliers, that's a different story. Anyways, take a look here. The time frame here doesn't matter too much for this here, but the main thing is to kind of look at the seasonality here. And this is just kind of an overview of what's going on with the market, and I'm pretty sure you can see a majority of this here. And what we can see here, just kind of give you some perspective, is for the year here so far. Right now, we've seen, this is 2025 down here on the bottom. We've seen pretty much a suboptimal returns here for Bitcoin. Okay, obviously last quarter was nice. Of course, this time last year with new president on the horizon, new hope, and he's backing crypto and all this wonderful stuff. And that we see what happens there when the residual comes into play, because obviously he had to shake things up and the market kind of turned upside down. So that's the market we're in right now is unlike anything we've seen in the past. So I want to recognize here that statistically we're favorable to see a pretty good continuation higher in November. Now, it hasn't always worked out that way, but the average amount of return here for November is roughly 10% based on the last 10 years of data. Okay. So it's just once again, just a rough estimate, kind of giving you some perspective on November, December typically being historically good months on average. But it doesn't mean much. We can see here previously, 2018, 2019, we had a kind of a unique market or a unique climate at that point. And the same thing here for 2020 and 2021, right? Those are both years that we saw some very odd things in the market. Okay. So the whole concept here is that while we're not in a position right now to be like super bearish, we're also wanting to respect the fact that we're transitioning to that right now. Okay. And what we should experience is a 9% increase this month, but we've almost already seen a 9% decrease this month, right? If you kind of count the candle wick there. So anyways, just some perspective there. I can post this on social media if you'd like, but generally speaking, this is just kind of a general idea of what's going on here. It's not something you want to, take home with you per se, or use it as a catalyst there. In other words, we shouldn't expect this month to be bullish just because we've had, slightly more likely favorability in this month in the past, right? Most of those averages are kind of skewed because those months were significant in earlier time frames. And for the most part, I would say that those cycles, the 4-year cycle, and just this constant repeat of the fact that Q4 is supposed to be good, I don't think we should expect that, just to be on the safe side. Okay, I'm not saying I'm bearish. I'm just telling you that we want to respect this current trend, which right now, for the moment, is still moving down. All right, that's kind of the concept. So, anyways, looking on the right hand side. Just to kind of round things out here, Bitcoin, 111,000 is still that area of open interest here on the larger time frames. That's the monthly open interest. And we look at the last 7 days. Let's see if there's any new levels here. Once again, 111 is up there. We got some open interest down below the price at 101.4. So 101,000 is a round number, is that local support for us. We can see open interest. We can see, this is liquidation delta. It is tapering off. It went from 16 billion to roughly maybe 10 billion now. So it's almost cut in half there, which is kind of good. Basically letting us know that most shorts are, secured profits. They close their positions, hopefully in profit, and some greedy ones are still left in there. I don't think it's a good place to be holding a short position just based on this short-term continuation higher. The probability of us continuing to that 105 to 107K range is still quite high. I'll explain more so why I feel that way. But at this point here, from a liquidation standpoint, this is the last 30 days of liquidation. There's just a small chunk left at about 97.5. Other than that, that wick down to 100,000 pretty much destroyed a lot of people. Okay, so that's kind of where we're at there on the larger time frames. So let's quickly identify just locally here, the last 7 days, where we're at for liquidation on Bitcoin. And quick perspective here is that there's small chunks of liquidation between 105 and 106 here locally, outside of 111, which we've known for a while. Okay, so that's kind of the rough estimate there. Now, looking at this short-term discontinuation, what we're looking for here for discontinuation of this descending trend, to clarify, because people are asking me, when do we break bullish? Are we going to? We're a long ways away from that, but in a perfect world, we're going to be, it's going to be 2 or 3 days from now, we're going to be consolidating in the 105 to 107K range. That's really what we want to look for, to be able to be confident in taking long positions. Obviously, we're going to see some outliers here and there where coins are responding just because they are massively overextended, which is what we're seeing here for Bitcoin. We technically were overextended leading into yesterday's analysis at 104.5K, and super greed came into play, and all the market makers got in with a nice little $99,000 to $100,000 entry, and now the price is pushing back up. Okay. But the key takeaway here is that massive overextension will lead to a relief rally. That's what we're seeing right now. It's commonly referred to as a dead cat bounce, which we are probably seeing as well. But the general concept here is that on the daily time frame, we're still fairly bearish, right? 110,000, there's that area of confluence with the volume and also the 0.618 fib level. But more importantly, we've got these moving averages hanging out there. Okay, so it just kind of lets us know that 110 will be our key level resistance here if we were to inevitably break through this trend, come back up. That seems like a good shorting opportunity, just kind of as a bumper sticker, right? Another bumper sticker is the fact that 105 to 107K, outside of this Fibonacci retracement areas has a lot of confluence too with local resistance. We've identified that yesterday, but I can reiterate that here today. But the concept remains the same. We're still very bearish on the macro structure, and we're not in a good position here. In fact, let's quickly look at the 3-day time frame, just give us some perspective here. And just kind of recognizing that we're a long ways away from our lower moving average at about 87,000. So hypothetically, we still haven't fully broken bearish if you look at it that way. But I think the weekly is a little bit different. This is the concept here where we want to make sure to remain above this. So that puts us about 103K. So ideally, in a perfect world, we're going to close at 103 or higher this week to put us in a position where we're still above that 50-day SMA on the weekly. That's a semi-important level for us, okay? So please understand, we haven't broken bearish quite yet, but we're trending towards that on the macro. And for right now, this little relief rally is nice, but the volume needs to remain high in order for us to be able to see a continuation higher to break this descending trend line. So overall, that's kind of where we're at there. The 4-hour time frame, just to summarize, is fairly well bearish. There's no other way around it. We hit this massive overextension here at actually 23 in the RSI, and money flow index increasing with stochastic swinging up 2 and MACD converging. So these are all pretty good signs here in the overall sense. But at this point here, we still haven't broken this descending trend. So I'm going to be looking for a bearish backtest of this 105 to 107K range here, partially because it was a previous low, but also because it kind of intersects with this descending trend there. And I think hypothetically, we're going to be in a position where we're going to see that reject out here soon. Okay. So those are my thoughts on Bitcoin. What are yours? Why don't you come up below? Let me know. If you're looking for a new exchange or possibly just want to help support the channel, Bitunix has got you covered. We've been partnered with this exchange for over 2 years. It's been our fan favorite for our community. And the reason why is because they take really good care of you. They offer trading reward bonuses as well as a reduction in fees. Best exchange I would recommend at this point. Link down below for more information. All right, folks, let's go and take a quick look here at Ethereum and double check some important stuff here. We'll need to update our fib levels and make sure that we are, well, staying fairly relevant, but the macro descending trend line is not even close to being broken. We're coming up on a key level resistance at 3,400. That was a previous 1-day candlestick closure here back in August. So it doesn't mean that that's like a super imperative number. It's just, you know, a previous trend essentially that may be retested here soon. So let's go ahead and get a refresh and kind of see where we're at for the back end data and just kind of clarify a few things for open interest, such as let's look at the lower timeframes here. Actually, this is the lower time frame, this last 7 days. So let's quickly double check. We got some open interest forming between 3,300 and roughly 3,200. So as per usual, that rough estimate of $100 every 100, we're seeing those support ranges for us. So it is good on the smaller time frames to see that developing. Okay, that implies we may actually see that retest of 3,300, but it also implies too that that's a stronger support level, starting to build that foundation of volume there with that interest as well. We can see liquidation delta has shifted from 25 to 15 billion. That's good, of course. It's cutting itself roughly down by 2/5. And what we can see here as well on the left-hand side, not a lot of liquidation here locally. I mean, obviously, depending on how you zoom in or zoom out, the last 7 days, that full liquidation sweep of that $3,100 range was pretty disastrous for a lot of folks. So taking a look here at the last, let's actually zoom in the last 3 days, see if there's any local liquidation we want to pay attention to, which there is. We can see 3,400 is that level that just got hit pretty hard. So anybody shorting at 3,400 just got hit there. And once again, folks, like if you're in profit on a short position from yesterday, why the hell haven't you taken profits? It's ridiculous to me to see this kind of liquidation after such a monumental move. People seem to think we're going to go down to 0 or 1,000 for Ethereum. Come on, you're going to get eaten up on fees as long as you hold the trade. Take some damn profit. Anyways, the whole concept here remains the same, 3,500 to 3,600, roughly every $100, we can see these heavier concentrations above the price. So obviously there's a lot above. This is very standard, very normal for a significant amount of short liquidation delta. So when we look at the macro structure here, let's go ahead and zoom out to the daily for ETH. And just kind of recognize once again, 3,400 is that local potential resistance here for us. Getting above that could incentivize the price to go higher. So I think that's a good little initial starting point there for us to kind of close above 3,400. And obviously for Bitcoin to maintain the 103 to 104K range. Okay, it's super important for us to get to more so 105K plus. But for right now, staying above this 103 to 104K range, that monthly, or sorry, the weekly closure here for Bitcoin needs to be a 103 or higher, right? To stay above that key level support. But the concept here Easy way to understand it is Ethereum is not bullish whatsoever, but it did bounce off of 30 on the RSI, which is a common pivot point for overextensions on the larger time frame. So it doesn't mean we're just going to go straight up from here. It just implies that a little bit more upside should be expected just based on the overall trend that we're seeing right now. Now, the 4-hour time frame is going to reflect that we have some time before we hit that moving average, or all moving averages rather, but also our descending trend. Now, no descending trend or ascending trend is perfect, but oftentimes they're going to run consistent with moving averages. And that's kind of what we're seeing here, right? So this implies if the price creeps up a little bit higher, 35, 3,600, we want to be mindful that we're probably going to see some rejection there based on that trend, the trend holding itself, right? And what that basically just means is in the last 20 days, we see an average price of 3,600 as a rough estimate right now. So when the price comes up to that level, it commonly rejects out because that's just what the selling pressure does over the last, 3 weeks worth of trading. Okay, so it's an interesting way that it works, but moving averages are just really good gauges of understanding the trend, and that's kind of the concept. They're not key level resistances or supports. They're just kind of areas that help us with confluence, okay? And that's really what it is too with trading, folks. People seem to look for like magical indicators that are going to answer all of your prayers, and the truth is there's no such thing. Building a case, every time you look at the analysis, you kind of just see like, okay, we got 9 reasons why the price should go higher and only 1 reason why it should go lower. That kind of builds a case that, hey, we're looking like maybe it's a better case scenario to maybe consider a long in that regard. So I like to mention that because some folks come over to my community, they got absolutely destroyed by Elliott wave theorists, or we call them Elliott wave idiots, because they have a tendency of just kind of, not all trends continue, right? We've already identified the year over year or month over month for Bitcoin, and that there's just significantly bad quarters and really good quarters. Just because there's a statistical favorability doesn't mean we're going to go in that direction. However, if you have multiple statistical favorabilities, that increases your odds, right? That's the kind of what I like to drive home. Anyways, that's neither here nor there. The 4-hour time frame does tell us that we are shifting momentum once more back up over 30 on the RSI, MFI over 20, stochastic swinging up. Obviously, there's a good signs. But once more, just kind of general rule of thumb in these situations, it's probably best to wait a little bit longer before you consider a trade, just because of how crazy things got yesterday. Generally, the rule of thumb is wait no less than 24 hours. We're getting close to that, but still, maybe even wait till tomorrow to consider trading. That's usually what I like to do. A full 48 is probably the best strategy. Okay, so those are my thoughts here on Ethereum. What are yours? Comment below. All right, folks, let's take a quick look here at Solana, see where we're at now. We can see we bounced off that low range of 150. We talked about that yesterday being an area of liquidation, but also kind of a macro support range. So just to kind of touch on this here, daily time frame, we saw a previous daily closure at 158. Therefore, the 150s was kind of an area of consideration. Based on previous volume too, we can see that 151 to 145 as that volume range here for the price action to have effectively bounced, right? So while it's not perfect, and this isn't the exact reason why it recovered, if Bitcoin kept going down, it'd be lower than that, right? It just kind of gives us that average range here of safety, a little bit of a safety net, letting us know that, hey, we have a chance of bouncing off that range. It's never perfect, folks. Try not to get too ahead of yourself, especially if you had a bad day yesterday. These things happen. These kind of trades are just like unusual, or at least the price action was very unusual. To the best of my knowledge, there was no significant fundamental catalyst causing this. It was just kind of probably all the whales getting together and manipulating the price as they do, right? Hey, you want 100,000 Bitcoin? Sure, I do too. Let's drive the price. Let's sell it all. Let's rebuy. Okay. Anyways, all that being said, now that liquidation's been swept, what do we look at next here? Well, open interest tells us 176 to 185 is that local range here. That's kind of the better case scenario for this coin. Now, when we took our trade yesterday, I think we got in at 162, immediately invalidated. We had to close that trade within about an hour. Now, all that said, with that trade closing, the price pulled back. I'm glad we closed out. But the truth is, we're right back at the entry, and I think we're still in good shape to see the price go a little bit higher to that local range of 170 to 180 as a very rough estimate. So let's talk about that. And the reason why I say that too is just because this coin did bottom out fairly well, even though it pulled back quite significant. If we have good volume today, then there's a good chance we see that continuation higher. We're going to be paying attention to volume, but also looking at liquidation. We went from 4 to 3 billion. Most other coins are, like Ethereum and Bitcoin so far, they've cut their liquidation delta almost in half, where this is only a quarter. So that tells me that there's low volume on this coin, and we're not in a good position to consider a long based on that metric alone. Now, we don't take that one thing and just use it as a trading baseline, but it is important that volume must be paid attention to, and it's something that I try to make sure to teach in not just my university videos, but also just in general as a trader. If the volume is low, it's typically a fake out. That's kind of the best way to describe it. Obviously, that can change at any given time, but the concept here is that we see this local liquidation here of 160 get swept. So anybody shorting at 162 just got hit there. There's a little bit left at 162 rather to 166, but for the most part, the local highs, we're going to see these little peaks and valleys. There's a lot of liquidation between 165 and 175. So overall, that's good. There's still liquidation left, implying that we could still consider a long position. Now, the reason why that's potential reality for us is because we're not quite close to our local high, or at least it was our local low rather, right? We previously could not close below 177 for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, almost 6 attempts to break that level, and eventually it did. So oftentimes when you see that happen, that level will be retested at some point. And coincidentally, that's really close to our level of open interest. And open interest does accumulate at previous highs and lows. So in this case here, we can presume that if the price were to continue higher, 177 will be that local resistance, okay? That's the general concept there. So that's kind of where we're at there for Solana on the daily time frame. We are seeing a nice bounce off 30 on the RSI. While this is not like perfect by any stretch, the MFI is right there with it. That does suggest higher volume, and we can see the volume candle so far today is pretty decent. So looking at the 4 hours, just to quickly clarify here, while this is still a descending trend and still considered to be a high risk trade, by the way, this does have some favorability on the back end, letting us know that stochastic and MACD have converged. We're back up over 30 in the RSI and 20 on the MFI. Those are all signs I like to look for when I consider a long position. So while I don't recommend taking a long because the price is still pulled back so hard in this case, it may be worth considering a short-term scalp from 160 to 170 is a rough estimate, right? There's a solid chance we just do see that happen, but you got to recognize that Bitcoin is kind of a little bit on the overextended side of the upside on the lower time frames. Solana should be too, so the safer play here is to wait for the local high to be retested as a new low. And basically what that means is just this guy here, right at about 158, wait for the price to pull back to 158, and that's a much better consideration for entry than it is right now at 160. So those are just kind of what I try to look for on these short-term continuations, because overall we are seeing some bullish behavior on lower time frames, but pretty much all altcoins are going to look like that here today, right? They're just the natural knee-jerk reaction to bottoming out and everybody buying the bottom, okay? How high is it going to go? That's the question. I think 170, 180 is our local top, but we'll see here soon, obviously, what that looks like. Specifically 177 based on the previous daily closure here at this level. So I'll post our playout chart on Twitter, Telegram, and Discord for you just so you can see that, but these are just kind of generally my thoughts here. What are yours? Why don't you comment below? If you're looking for a new exchange or possibly just want to help support the channel, Bitunix has got you covered. We've been partnered with this exchange for over 2 years. It's been our fan favorite for our community, and the reason why is because they take really good care of you. They offer trading reward bonuses as well as a reduction in fees. Best exchange I would recommend at this point. Link down below for more information. All right, let's move on to SUI, double check this here and quickly understand where we're at. Now, even though we did secure profits on a very high risk trade on this coin, it's still considered to be high risk. We're at a 9 on TD sequential, massively overextended to the downside. So it's not a really good position here for the price action to want to take a long position. Okay, now if we look at SUI on the right-hand side here with open interest, we can see 220 to 210 is that local resistance range. That is essentially where I talked about yesterday as making sure you secure profits if you do consider a long position, because that's just kind of those tighter local margins. We can see, however, liquidation delta is almost cut in half. That's a good sign, generally implying there's probably higher volume here. And then the same thing here as well with liquidation. There's really no liquidation left outside of 180, and I think that's a pretty tall order to be able to consider 180 again as a potential price point. So that's kind of what we're looking at there for SUI. Looking at the daily time frame to clarify here. We're in a position right now where the price action at 245 is one of those key level resistances for us. Just kind of be mindful of that. I don't think we're going to see that right away, but 245 is one of those areas. And I basically just have some of these levels here for us, just kind of giving us perspective on what ranges are important to pay attention to. So just kind of give you some perspective of our local bottom, 220. That's an area of open interest as well. So I think that's probably the more important one to pay attention to. The daily time frame doesn't have any significant convergences. The 4 hour will probably have them though, which is common right now based on that massive overextension. So I do think we could see 210 to 220 as a realistic probability for this coin. So if you do end up taking a long, make sure you watch it close. But just recognize we haven't broken our descending trend line. We're still under most moving averages. Under 50 on the RSI, statistically, the favorability of being successful in a trade like this is lower. Okay, that's kind of the concept. So that's why as the risk level increases, your margin and your leverage should decrease. That's the concept there. Okay, so overall, that's what we're looking at here for SUI. All right, folks, take a quick look here at XRP. And first things first, we're going to look at the backend data before we jump into the charts, because I think that there was some pretty significant areas here that we wanted to pay attention to, specifically with open interest. And we can see 215 was achieved, and the price, I wouldn't say it bounced off that level. We came as low as like $2 almost, but the price action looked pretty bearish at that point. But once more, we're getting close to that psychological support of 2 to 210. That was a previous range for this coin here, so there's a distinct probability that if we do see that again, that's a great consideration for an average entry, as we highlighted yesterday. Now, when we look at the overall delta here, we can see it's tapered off from 1.2 to roughly 600 million, so that's almost cut in half, implying we have good volume here. When we look at the last, let's actually look at the lower time frames, because the last 7 days, there's literally no liquidation left to the downside. There's more to the upside than the downside here. So 233 is that outlier just above our local high. So hypothetically, you take a long right now, 233 should be a take profit target or an area of consideration for you. I wouldn't recommend just taking a short in the blind at that level, but oftentimes once liquidation levels have been swept, the price will inevitably recover back to its local high. All that said, though, let's look at the daily time frame and just kind of see where we're at, get some perspective once more, and just kind of zooming out here, giving us some really large time frame perspective. When we look at the, well, let's exclude that last little outlier down there. We can see, what was it, 245, I think it was? Yeah, 240 rather. 240 is that point of control. So once more, the price continues to progress higher. Don't be a goober and just try to take along to the moon, right? Simply secure profits between now and 240. That's kind of the concept there. Now, it's not like it's an exact level, because it's a macro perspective. It's going to inevitably average itself out there at some point. But the key takeaway here is that we have the most buying and or selling pressure at 240. Therefore, that's considered to be a resistance because it's above us, right? Now, once we break bullish, it's a different story. But at this point, we're still under 50 on the RSI. MACD isn't converging. There's nothing good on the daily time frame, as with altcoins in general. All altcoins, we don't see that. 4-hour time frame is probably going to reflect we have some semi-bullish behavior, as per usual, very consistent with other coins. MACD convergence, 4-hour RSI shift there. Good news is this coin didn't really hit an overextended state on the RSI. So it really implies that there's a lot of buying pressure with this coin, which makes sense considering its community. And we can see the money flow index is increasing. So the overall sense here is that we're looking like a short-term relief rally makes perfect sense. Now, we've already kind of seen that relief rally. How much higher is it going to go? We've already kind of addressed that. 240 is that local, I would say that point of control here for us. It's also that 0.5 fib level, or really close to it. So I would say best case scenario is 240 in the short-term continuation. But we're going to be paying attention to this descending trend and just kind of seeing roughly where we're at here in the, as time progresses. Right now, it's very difficult to gauge where we're going to be next. And truthfully, you're just kind of shooting in the dark in a lot of ways if you're taking a long position right now. But if you do, make sure you take your profit when you can, and try not to be super greedy. We could get lucky with a Bitcoin pump past 105 to 107K, but I'm really leaning towards Bitcoin, or leaning towards a short at 105 to 107K for Bitcoin if we see that. And the likelihood of a rejection at that area is quite high. If that happens, what do you think is going to happen XRP? It's proven to be fairly consistent with Bitcoin at this point. So it's important to recognize that we're probably not going to see anything monumental from this coin, right? It's pretty much par for the course on average with all the other coins for the moment. Although slightly more bullish than others just based on some of the indicators we've seen so far. But that doesn't mean you take along to the moon, okay? Don't be an emotional idiot and trade with respect of the markets, and you'll always be more successful. Those are all things I teach my Trading Academy community and Signals group. Be sure to check that out. Links down below for that. CryptoCache.tech. And of course, be sure to check out Bitunix too, folks. These guys are phenomenal. Excellent rewards if you use my link to register. There's about, 12 days left of this benefit here. Make sure you take advantage. It's easy money there for you. It's all available for you there for my community. Cool. Have a good rest of your day. We'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourself out there.